So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you examples. I'm going to play you one. I was in New York. Anybody from New York City? I mean, working there? No, everyone's from New York City eventually, but I mean, living there now. Living, working in the city now. All right. I do a lot of work in New York City. My mom was an immigrant. My grandfather, New York City. I had a huge amount of work there in the South Bronx, which is one of the toughest neighborhoods you can find. In fact, maybe I'll play you a video in a little bit. So one day I'm taking a tour of an elementary school, and I wasn't doing any workshops. I was minding my own business. I was just walking around with a friend of mine who's a teacher, but this is one of those elementary schools in the Bronx where they have to walk you to your car. It's so dangerous. It's unbelievably dangerous. So I get in the building and I'm feeling okay, and I get upstairs and they're taking me around, and then the sirens start. You know, there's police coming for something. Every other day, something. And the principal comes up to the room I'm in and he says, "We got a problem. Do you mind if I borrow the teacher? Could you sub?" So I was a tourist, and the next minute I'm a sub. Tourist sub, tourist sub. And then on the way out, the teacher looks back and he says, "By the way, the lesson is poetry. Please teach poetry." I don't teach poetry. Now, what do you think kids from the Bronx do when they know the principal and their teacher's tied up and they have a nerd for a sub? Guess what they do? They race to the window and look outside to see what's going on, and I'm begging them to sit down, and I've lost complete control. What would you do in that situation? What would you do? I had my iPod with me. I had my iPod. It has a microphone. Mine has a microphone. So I took out my iPod and I said, "I have an iPod." Every kid turned around, looked at me, because iPods are blocked, right? Teachers don't say, "I have an iPod." You just don't say that. I did. So they all turned around, and I said, "Look, I have a microphone in mine, and if you sit down and you start to write a little bit about your poetry, not even real poetry, just about your poetry, I'll record your voice and put it on iTunes." Every kid sat down. Every kid. Now, a lot of these kids don't have the internet at home. They're too poor. But they know what iTunes is. Just trust me. The kids in the South Bronx know what iTunes is. And they also know that I meant it, that I probably knew enough to put their voice on the internet. And I do. Now, here's what I believe. I believe if you change the audience, you tell kids the whole world is going to hear their stuff, they take it just slightly more seriously than if they're handing it in to a teacher. Do you see that? That's what I see. And I'm convinced one of the most important things educators could do at this moment in history is walk out of our classrooms and pay attention to what kids are doing with technology when they're not in school. I'm absolutely convinced probably the healthiest thing we can do. Instant feedback, which is basically what these things allow any teacher to get, is instant feedback. Research, Csikszentmihalyi, have any of you read Flow? The book Flow? He talks about instant feedback, how important it is for any learner or any teacher to know how well they're doing at the moment they're doing it. All right, next idea. Let's say you have to improve test scores in history, which you do. So here's how you're going to do it. We have a couple people here from England, so this will be fun. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit of history that you might not have been told when you took your high school class. But I used to teach American history in Lexington, which counts for something. General Gage was the opposing general to Washington, right? You studied. No, you didn't. You didn't. The reason you didn't study General Gage is because you were only taught the American point of view. In this country, we have a great capacity to teach one version of the truth, ours. Would you believe me if I were to tell you the British have a different version of the truth? They have a whole different story of what happened. Now, syntax, American Revolution, General Gage, I get 3,000, but I don't want 3,000. I only want those that are hosted. Host is a command, ac.uk. This means that the extension position in the addresses is all going to be limited to ac.uk's. That's academic institutions in the United Kingdom. So far, I know you're bored, but it'll get interesting in a moment. All right. Now, so I got 8, and one of them is from Oxford. Why the American Colonists Revolt? Well, it's a mythology. It's a complex mythology built up around the American Revolution. And what's really going on is, the turkey-eating people, that's us. Now, get it out, okay. But I have your attention, don't I? Right? If you were my history class, and I presented the British point of view, which is in polar opposite of what our textbooks say, I even get the attention of high school students. Now, I got to tell you, I taught American history. Every one of my students did not love American history. It was hard. In fact, very few of them loved it. 2 or 3 maybe in every course, maybe. But today, because of the internet, I can collect lots of versions of the truth. Better yet, I can ask my students to do this. I'm going to teach my students the grammar and syntax of the internet. I'm going to ask them to come to class prepared to take the position of what British historians are saying is our story of our revolution. I could do that, couldn't I? And they can find the British version as long as I teach them syntax and grammar. More fun than that is I bet I can find the email, I've done this, I can find the email address of the people at Oxford, and I can tell my students, instead of having a written exam on Friday, either essays or multiple choice, we're going to have a live debate with students in England who are studying the American Revolution. Live debate. Which do you think is a more motivating experience? The written test on Friday, only given by the teacher, for the teacher, because not only am I going to introduce this concept of authentic audience around the world, live debate, but I'm going to record it. I can do that with Power Gramo, right? Over Skype? Anyway, I can do that. I can take a podcast, I can create a recording of the debate and push it to my blog. And I'm going to tell my students for the next year, anyone around the world is going to be able to listen to the debate and comment to the blog. So you better win. It was our revolution. Now, I'm not going to hurt U.S. history test scores. I think I'm going to help them. But I cannot simply add technology to a classroom. I am convinced that we have to globalize our curriculum. We have to take the curriculum, K-12, and we have to find all the spots across the curriculum where we can connect our students to an authentic audience somewhere on the planet.